do you do? Welcome in. It's ACC Baseball, etc. on this fine Monday, April 17th. An exciting weekend of college ball that we're going to sift through at some point with Danny Graves, who is on assignment, we'll say. He was in studio in Bristol at ESPN over the weekend, traveling today. So Daron Vaught, that's me. I am flying solo for this edition of ACC Baseball, etc. We've got an interview. I'm going to knock it out. Chris Pollard, the head coach of Duke baseball, after a big series win against Boston College. That was at Boston College, the number then 11th team in the country. They, of course, have dropped in the rankings as well. But, man, don't look now. The Blue Devils are doing that thing again where they play their best baseball in the second half of the year. I think you guys, if you listen, have gotten to know that I do a lot of Duke's games, or I certainly have this year for about 4 weeks consecutively. I saw Duke in action and was part of the broadcasts for their series. So it's a program I know well. Chris is a coach that I know well. I actually met him when I was 16 years old. Over half my life ago, guys. I was a young player, and I grew up in the mountains of southwestern Virginia, which is basically directly north of Boone, North Carolina, where Pollard coached at Appalachian State for a long time. I liked Appalachian State as a school, liked baseball and playing baseball, and thought, I might want to continue playing baseball into my collegiate career. So I went to some showcases there and would talk to Chris as a high school player to a college coach. And I mean, I think I've maybe mentioned on here too, I almost went and walked on for him at Appalachian State. Ended up not doing that, but it's funny how life works. I end up in the Triangle of North Carolina. He ends up now over a decade, I believe, at Duke as the baseball coach there, and we've developed this relationship. So no Danny today. We will get caught up on headlines and some overarching stuff. We'll do Hall of Name with him a little bit later in the week. We just got to figure out his schedule after he gets back from being in studio all weekend. So let's get to it. Chris Pollard on ACC Baseball, etc. So joining me now is the coach. I didn't write this down. 11th year, is that right?
Yeah,
wow.
That's right. Good. Yeah, it's good memory on your part.
11th year Duke baseball head coach Chris Pollard, fresh off of a trip to the Northeast and a series win over number 11 Boston College. I mean, a big series victory for you guys. I know you had your usual radio show with our friend Chris Edwards earlier today. Got to imagine that was a fun show and a fun trip back from Boston.
Those long flights are a lot more fun when you win on Sunday. It was really a great series, and I want to say kudos to Boston College and to Coach Gambino, because they're building a really special atmosphere there. We had 2,600 people in the ballpark on Saturday, and it was a terrific ACC college baseball atmosphere. They had great crowds all weekend, and I said to our staff after the series was over yesterday, I said, I never imagined in my 11 years now in the ACC that Boston College would be a tough place to go play from a fan environment standpoint. They've always been very good on the field. Coach Gambino always has talented teams, but now you go in there and there's atmosphere, and they make it hard on you. And it was a lot of fun. It was good college baseball all weekend.
Yeah, love that. And your guys are look, not that anybody ever sleeps on Duke baseball, but coming off of a year where the results were less than you guys had imagined or hoped for, this is a team that's and it's young too. That goes into this too. You got a lot of young guys who are contributing in big ways. This is a team that's starting to surprise some people. I've got a question around that, Coach. The RPI for your Duke team this week skyrocketed, 52 to 37 now. And again, it's getting into a place where this is a tournament team. How do you balance? We'll talk about the youth of the team in a bit, but you formerly you coached at Appalachian State. Most years when you were at App, it was okay. The NCAA regional equation is easy: win the conference.
Right.
In the ACC, that's not quite the case. How do you balance coaching to the point of, okay, look, you go win games that you should win and play the right way, and again, win games and stack up wins, and everything's going to take care of itself. But then from your perspective, it's part of your job description, right? That changes from one conference to the other. I guess it's my way of asking, how much do you pay attention to the RPI? Is that something that's ever really heavily on your mind throughout the season?
The reality is, if you just take care of business, the RPI takes care of itself, right? In this league. And whether it's preseason rankings or in-season top 25 rankings or the RPI, we just don't discuss those things with our team because they're irrelevant to what we need to accomplish on a day in and day out basis. Nick Saban, what's he call it? Rat poison. Yeah. Those things are rat poison. All we need to worry about is focusing on winning today, meaning what does our preparation need to be on this Monday to recover from a 3-game series physically, to recover from the travel, to get back at it academically, to get in the weight room, and then start to get ourselves ready mentally, physically, and emotionally for a really good William and Mary team tomorrow that's playing well. I think if you start thinking big picture and trying to, scribble out the math on paper and we need this many, it just gets you really out of your process. And so I'd be lying if I told you that at some points in my career I didn't do that or really worry about that. Sure. I can tell you with a lot of honesty, we don't spend any time worrying about that stuff now. It's just focus on what do we need to do today to be, to look back at the end of the day and go, yeah, we did our very best to win today and get ready for tomorrow.
Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of process, me, I do this when we meet prior to a weekend of broadcasts. I'm going to ask some big picture stuff. I love picking your brain on just sort of coaching philosophy and things like that. You underwent a lot of coaching staff changes coming into this season. And this may be stuff that we've talked about before leading up to these games that I've called of your team, but for sake of a different audience, if you would just, what was the offseason like for you after the less than satisfactory to the standard that you've established there at Duke finish to last season, and then undergoing so many changes to the coaching staff, challenging in a lot of ways, I would imagine.
Yeah, it was the most difficult year of my career professionally. If I'm being candid with you, we underachieved on the field, and so part of my frustration was that I felt like we had some cultural issues in our program. We had taken so much pride in having a great culture, building a great culture, and that had been one of the things that we pointed to as a big reason for our success. And there was some erosion there that needed to be addressed. And then on top of that, we saw a lot of transition with our staff. And so it kicked my butt. The spring of 2022 and the summer of 2022 was difficult for me professionally speaking, but it also, was an opportunity for growth, and it stretched me. And I think, I tell our players, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, and feel like came out of it with a better understanding of some things that I needed to change and some ways that we could adapt as a program to better position ourselves, to be where we wanted to be on a consistent basis. So it was hard to answer your question, but really like the end result. And when I say end result, that's maybe not the best choice of words because we're still very much a work in progress. But I like the dynamic that resulted from all the transition, and I like the ways that it's forced me to get involved in some areas of the program where I hadn't been very involved.
Yeah, and it's the microcosm of life conversation, right? That I'm sure you have with players all the time about the game, and it's one of the reasons you love the game. I'm sure it's one of the reasons I love the game. It's the always becoming nature of it, right? And you get a decade into a job where you've done really, really well. Even still, you get those reminders occasionally, right? You need to
No doubt,
you need
man.
to adapt.
It's a humbling sport. It's a game of failure, and it's a game that will humble you and live through both of those things in 2022.
One of those coaching changes was Brady Kirkpatrick, your new pitching coach. I know you've raved about him in other conversations that we've had. And this is one that Danny and I talked about this on this show a couple of weeks ago. And I'm sort of dying to know and hear sort of the process there. And I think you know me well enough to know that whenever I say these things, it's never out of a place of criticism or anything like that. It's just, winning in this game, there are many ways to do it. And if there was one pathway to do it, there would be an immeasurable number of Chris Pollards and Dan McDonald's. And I mean, you name the coaches, right? It's the reason you guys are in the positions you're in. Coming into the season, I sort of expressed to Danny that there was a time, maybe not even like 5 years ago, Chris, coming into the season without 3 distinguished starting pitchers to enter your weekend rotation, enter the season that way. There was a time 5 years ago, maybe it was like 10 years ago, Coach, where you guys came in and you had Jonathan Santucci. You knew he was going to be your Friday guy. Alex Gal has been really good as the Saturday guy.
Mm-hmm.
And then Sunday was sort of like, okay, we'll see, right? And you could tell you and Brady both were pretty comfortable with that, given the number of arms that you guys have. I'm not saying you wouldn't love someone who was an obvious choice to be that Sunday starter, but it was just a reminder that, man, there was a time not that long ago where a coaching staff, maybe even Chris Pollard specifically, would have been like, okay, who are we picking to sort of wedge in there and force to become our third starting pitcher? Does that make sense? Right? Like in terms of developing a starting pitcher, you just it would have been baptism by fire and just throwing somebody into that role and watching it develop as the season goes on. I'm so curious what happens in that conversation between you and Brady in the preseason, and even as you adjust things now, because you've got a couple of guys who are giving you some really good starts as of late and positioning themselves in that rotation in Andrew Healy and Ryan Higgins. What was that like, sort of going through, okay, we could do this, all right, we're settled on this, just sort of a mishmash on Sundays and making it work?
Yeah, we felt like when we evaluated our pitching staff at the end of the fall, at that point we knew that Luke Fox was out for the season.
Right. Yeah.
And if you'd asked me in August, like, what's the strength of this team, I would have said, well, it's our ability to run a guy like Luke Fox and a guy like Jonathan Santucci out there the first 2 days of a series and hopefully get 6 innings out of those guys. And that's we're gonna have success running 2 lefties that have premium stuff on the front half of the weekend. And after the fall, when we knew Luke had Tommy John and was not going to play this spring, we kind of reevaluated and said, well, we got guys that we like for different reasons. We've got some guys that are a little bit light on stuff, but they have a lot of experience and they throw strikes. So those guys are going to be able to navigate a lineup one time just based on their savvy, on their experience, and on their ability to command the zone. And then we had at the other end these young guys that were really light on experience but had really, really good stuff. And we felt like, you know what, for one time through the line, we're not going to ask these guys to do more than they're ready to do. We're just going to ask these guys to go out there and give us everything they got for about 40 pitches. And then when they run out of gas, we'll get somebody else in there. And for the most part, that's how we've approached this entire spring. And especially since Santucci is out, we're almost doing that every game. But what's starting to emerge a little bit, Daron, is just that some of these young guys with good stuff are now reaching an experience point where you trust them to go multiple times through a lineup.
Yeah.
So, Andrew Healy, we knew he had good stuff, but he needed to grow into it. And now he's starting to do that and understanding how to navigate a lineup 2 times. And potentially, as he keeps going deeper into the year, maybe even 3 times. Same thing with a guy like Ryan Higgins. Ryan Higgins threw the ball really, really well for us this fall. We knew he was capable of getting some big outs. He went 5 yesterday against Boston College, but he needed to learn how to do that. And so, to your point, rather than just sticking him in there and saying you've got the first 5 whether it goes well or not, let's let him kind of grow into it a little bit at a time. And in doing so, I think what it's forced us to do, I was going to say allowed us to do, but really it's forced us to do, is develop a lot of depth. And so you look now, and we've pitched 19 different guys in a Duke baseball uniform this spring, and I think we've got 15 guys right now that'll probably wind up with 20-plus innings when the season's over with. And so we've got a lot of guys that we feel comfortable going to in big spots, and maybe more so than any point in my career.
Yeah. Was there any resistance to that? I feel like you're comfortable talking about sort of the ways in which you've grown as a coach, given your transparency about last year. Was there, and maybe this resistance would have come much earlier in your career, was there resistance to that methodology?
No, I mean, I think Brady and I were very much on the same page. Like, we're going to have to do this. Like, if we force a guy to try to go out there and go 5 and he's not ready to do it, we might lose him for the year. He may reach a point confidence-wise where we're not getting anything out of him. And so let's let him grow into it. And so he and I were in lockstep, and our pitching staff has really embraced this. And that was the other big part of this, is we're asking guys to kind of approach this very non-traditionally in terms of how we've navigated games. And our guys have really embraced it, and haven't looked to have a clearly defined role. We've told guys, we were really honest with guys before the season started. Look, you're probably not going to have a clearly defined role for weeks, maybe months, as we kind of grow this staff. And we've had some guys that have now defined roles for themselves, but it's taken us almost the first 2/3 of the season to do it.
Yeah, I think that maybe above everything else is to me anyways, from my vantage point, the savviest thing about the way you guys have approached the pitching staff is in a way it's player centric, right? You do the baptism by fire thing, and you run the risk of getting somebody's confidence out of whack that is, irreparable in some cases.
Yeah, right? for the rest of the year, right? Yeah. We were very cognizant of the fact that, listen, if we ask a guy to do too much too early, then that guy may not be a piece of the puzzle for us come April, because confidence is just shot.
Yeah. So I love that it sounds like, and it certainly looks like, I mean, look, I had a stretch earlier in the year where I saw you guys, I think it was 4 consecutive weekends. It certainly looks and feels like the guys are bought into those roles.
Yeah, no question. They've done our kids have done a great job buying into it.
Yeah, it just feels like, if you went into a Sunday telling them, hey, 9 of you are going to get an inning apiece. And
we've done that some days.
Yeah. And the offense is going to do what it can to give you the runs and the support. But there you go. Make the best of your opportunity, piece it together. It's cool to see and again, you can you feel it when you're watching one of those games, the way that they gel, and I love having your guys' teams for calls this year, and it's just it makes for a fun product in a lot of ways. And you've mentioned the guys with stuff. You've had some breakout guys. James Talon is your de facto closer. He's a high leverage guy basically for you guys. Fran O'Shell III, who I saw last year, but has broken out in a big way this year.
Made a huge jump.
Yeah, huge jump. And that, I mean, that's just a couple of names. I know you could brag on most of them, if not all of them, in the progress that they've made. With regard to freshmen, let's sort of transition to the lineup. Andrew Fisher already has the Duke freshman home run record. He's a guy that you and I have talked about a lot so far this year. Again, for the sake of a new audience and a different type of audience with this show, where did he come from?
Yeah, great question. So, well, first, Andrew committed to us during COVID. So the first time I evaluated Andrew Fisher was at PG National when it was, completely remote. So all of us coaches, we were still in the dead period, and we were all sitting on our living room couches watching PG National and in Hoover. And, we knew Andrew because he'd worked with a former Duke player that stayed very close to the program there in that part of New Jersey. And we knew, hey, this is a guy that you need to have on your radar. And then saw him at PG National, and that started the communication process. And then, as he continued to develop through high school, we started hearing more and more about the draft risk, the chance that he may go in the draft because of the hit tool. And so we knew there was a chance that he could sign and may not get to campus. He actually, I think he would tell you this too. He came to summer school still with 1 foot kind of not fully in the door. Like 1 foot still was out of the door while he was here in summer school. He actually went home for the draft because he was still that, intrigued by the potential that he may go high enough to start his professional career. And then he spent the entire fall hurt. So he did very little this fall in terms of live work. Rehabbed and worked hard to get healthy, but we had no way of really knowing what we had because we just hadn't seen him against our staff, against our pitching. And he came out with very, very few live at-bats under his belt in the spring and just started kind of climbing the depth chart very rapidly, just with his performance in our preseason scrimmages. But I was still pretty reluctant to play him early, and we didn't play him first weekend of the season. He didn't start. He didn't come off the bench. And then, we ran him in there against Liberty and had a good at-bat, and we weren't playing well offensively. And our coaching staff had really been on me pretty good, like, hey, he's ready. Put him in the lineup. And I had resisted it, and we put him in against Baylor in the DH spot, and kind of the rest is history. And you want to talk about somebody taking advantage of the moment, taking advantage of the opportunity they've been given. And it's been so much fun to watch him. He hit that big home run yesterday to kind of seal that game, seal the series, the 3-run home run in the 9th. And he came in the dugout after the game was over with. We were packing up, and I gave him a hug, and I just said, man, are you having fun with this? Like, I hope you're embracing this because this is really cool. And he's such a likable kid. He's such a good person, and he's endeared himself to his teammates. And so he's a fun guy to root for.
Yeah. And fun is, I'm glad you mentioned fun because it seems like, especially given your self-diagnosed culture issues from a year ago, one of the integral words with this team as I watch it on a regular basis, Coach, is fun. Is that something as part of your evaluation from last year that, I don't know, maybe you force isn't the right word, but you prioritize a little more coming into this year?
We had to. We had to prioritize energy, and we had to make it a looser, more enjoyable environment for the kids to be around in practice and games. And that meant me doing a better job of being loose around our guys and giving them freedom and space to be themselves and to enjoy being out at the field every day. And this group has really, unlike many that I've ever had, has really just embraced each other. And, they enjoy playing the game with each other. I've never, and this is an honest statement, I don't think I've ever had a team that enjoys riding the bus together more than this group. Like I think they would have been perfectly happy to ride the bus back from Boston, because I've never seen a group that has so much fun with each other. From the minute you get on the bus, it's hooping and hollering, and they're playing games, and they're talking, and they're playing music loud, and they just enjoy each other's company. They enjoy celebrating each other's success. And I told him yesterday, I said, I've had so much fun just watching you and being around you. So it's been cool for me.
That is so cool to hear. All right. So I'm going to tap back into your coaching philosophy, psychology brain here. Look, like, I think anyone who knows you as a coach, as a person, would agree. You got some old school tendencies to you, Chris.
Yes. Right.
You mentioned the hooping and the hollering, but you understand, it sounds like, that's sort of necessary for all this to be. How do you draw the line with yourself? And do you catch yourself sort of reflecting on it and being like, man, there was a Chris Pollard who would not have been cool with this?
Yeah. And I mean, and also, so like, having good self-awareness. Our 2012 team at Appalachian State was a lot like this. Our 2018 Duke team was a lot like this, just in terms of they were a loud, boisterous, fun-loving group, and so, like, I've had to remind myself just to step back, and sometimes less is more in terms of what I say, and it is, as long as they're respecting the game and respecting their opponent, let these guys go out there and be kids and have fun with it. And, it's not my nature, as you know. My wife and kids would probably tell you I'm not a very fun guy. That doesn't come natural to me. I'm just kind of a serious person and kind of no nonsense. But I also have enjoyed watching them be themselves and go out and enjoy playing the game. And who am I to get in the way of that? Sometimes the best coaching is when you just stay out of the way.
Yeah, I love it. And there's an overarching realization too, that, like, and this, you're well aware of it. You practice your gratefulness exercises, I'm sure, mentally on a regular basis. Like,
100%.
It's a game. You're dealing with young men who, in a lot of cases, you can't say this around most of college baseball anymore, but in a lot of cases, these are like 18-year-old guys. And, in a game where we got more and more 23, 24-year-olds than
that's
ever.
Right.
You're dealing with young men who this time last year, their seasons were basically done. And, that it puts it in perspective. So they're having fun. You're letting them. I think it's a great sign of the leadership there at Duke. And again, I've seen your team a lot already this season. So,
and Daron, I want to say this too. Our assistant coaches, our coaching staff has done a great job of cultivating it. Like, they've spawned some of this. They've given guys freedom and encouraged it and embraced it, and so they deserve a ton of credit for really allowing this to grow.
Yeah, and I think you've said it a time or two before to me earlier in this season. You were intentionally, when hiring for these open roles, you intentionally went younger with coaches, right? Was that was sort of a bullet point in those processes?
Yeah, I want to give credit. Cliff Godwin at East Carolina, who I have so much respect for, talked about some of the changes on their staff over the last few years, and talked about the importance of having young energy. And I had always, opted for, experience, and it really resonated with me when we were in this position this summer and needed to fill these spots. Hearing Cliff talk about how he felt it was really important to keep youth in his assistant coaching staff, and obviously the success they've had speaks for itself. But that was in the back of my mind as we started out on this process.
That's an interesting. Again, I'm just thinking, because I've got you sat down here, Chris, thinking of your journey as a coach. I think for most coaches early in their head coaching tenures, it's about, okay, what assistants can I get that would help me? Right? You sort of look for experience, and it's you're building a squad to sort of help you in that role. Whereas now you've transitioned into this period in your coaching career where it's like, okay, what's going to help the guys? It's a cool.
No, I hope
Again,
so. I
I'm just sort of,
appreciate you saying that. I hope so. It's
yeah,
about the players. I mean, it's not about us as coaches. It's a players' game, and it's about their experience. And so I think it is important that we as coaches don't forget that it ain't about us.
yeah, absolutely. I got one more before I can let you get on your way. I know you got a tough week. You mentioned William and Mary in the non-con. You guys have Louisville this weekend.
Yeah, it's a tough week.
It does not get easier in this
No.
league, man. It's part of what makes it great. We've talked about the youth of this team. You mentioned, and I actually just alluded to it, the idea that as high school seniors, they don't play nearly the schedule that this
Right.
is. Your guys seemingly are getting better as the year goes on. How do you and your staff navigate working with the younger guys like an Andrew Fisher, who has this sort of controlled chaos and violence to his swing, right? That could be physically very taxing if you
Right.
stretch his season to twice as long as he's ever played before. And then the pitchers, obviously, the wear and tear on arms speaks for itself and that sort of thing. How do you guys navigate not overextending them, but things are going well? So, it's not like they need it just yet to have the reins pulled back on them.
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and it's super important. And I don't know that I have the answer because it's more feel than it's more art than science. But one thing I do know is our strength and conditioning coach, I absolutely believe is the best in the country. And so much credit for our ability to sustain physicality over the course of a season goes to him and the job that he does. Not just back in the off season, just moving weight to get stronger to prepare for the year, but the job that he does with these guys during the course of the season, maintaining that strength, but working at mobility, working out recovery, so that their bodies hold up really well. And we've been a team that has traditionally played better down the stretch than we do early. And I think he deserves so much credit for that because of the way he prepares these guys physically. Now, the mental side of it and the emotional side of it, to your point, that's a different thing. And there's not, I don't have a crystal ball for that piece. And so we just take it day by day, and we try to know our guys and try to have a good pulse for each guy individually. And does a guy need a day off, or is he good to go? And so it's a balance, but so much of it, if your body feels good, if you feel strong, then your mind and your emotions tend to hold up better. And that's where Dan Perlmutter does such a great job for us getting these guys ready physically.
Yeah, that's a great way to look at it. And I should say, playing better later in the season, something of a calling card for you guys in your time there at Duke. So not that that's coming as a surprise that you guys are emerging at this point in the season. Great stuff, Chris. I really do appreciate it. I've got
thanks for having me on
for you and what you're doing there at Duke. I love watching this team. Looking forward to seeing them again. I think I've got the Georgia Tech series, 2 of those 3 games.
Maybe that'll be a big one.
Yeah, the middle one's on ACCN, and I think I've got the first games 1 and 3 on ACCNX. As it stands now, they could always flex things here and there, and weather has been pretty wacky this season. So looking forward to seeing them again soon, and best of luck this week with more tough games that I know you guys are more than capable of winning.
Well, let me say this before we go. I appreciate you too. And the respect goes both ways. You're really good at what you do, and you're really good for college baseball. And so we need guys like Daron Vaught promoting our sport and repping our sport on TV. And so we're grateful. And I'm speaking for all the coaches around the ACC for you and what you're doing for ACC baseball.
It means a lot. It means a lot, Chris. I appreciate that. All right, go get some wins. William and Mary and Louisville this week.
Yeah, we'll see you soon.
All right. Thanks again to Chris Pollard, Duke head coach. Just awesome stuff from him. I said it in the interview. I really do love picking his brain for coaching and philosophy type type things. He's a very insightful guy he's very thoughtful, right? No decision he makes is haphazardly, and I appreciate that and respect it and admire it, to be honest. So that's it for this edition of ACC Baseball, etc. Big week in the league coming up. Like I said, Danny and I will circle up at some point this week. We're not 100% sure when that's going to drop yet, but good news is you get a bonus episode out of it. As a reminder, we're on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube at ACCBSBETC on each of those. Give us a rating, a review, subscribe, whatever the medium calls for, Apple, Spotify, wherever. 5 stars, of course, and appropriate for air, and we'll read it on the show. We've got some to sift through when we've got Danny back in the studio. I'm using my air quotes for those that can't see me on video. The studio, which is basically the 2 screens mushed together whenever we do it in that fashion. For Danny Graves, who you will hear from later in the week, I'm Daron Vaught. Thanks for tuning in again to ACC Baseball, etc.